Yeah, yeah, I know.
Hmm? You want me to go get one? Anybody who knows me knows I'm many things, but one thing is not egotistical, so it doesn't even bother me. I don't even notice. Thank you. Well, as much as anything, for the future generations who you hope want to do these things. For a minute, I thought you were torn off a sling. I'm like, what? Yeah, I was waiting for him for a couple of minutes because he was pounding away in there on his keyboard. How many keyboards has he gone through yet? I used to have a dog that would. Really?
I've got to run and grab my laptop.
Library.
Mayor, is there a reason the blinds are always shut?
Here, because they said to.
Why? If they wanna shoot us, they can come in here and get a better aim.
Where's your gun? You better tell me you brought one. We got out of here. He's probably a better shot.
Oh, yeah. Mhm. Mhm. Been that way.
You're gonna burn all the volunteers. That kind of thing. That's worse than church now.
Yeah, I don't know, I think it will have an effect. Oh, it didn't rain.
No, I can, but. No, let's just not then.
Calling to order the Parowan City Council special meeting. It is Thursday, May 16th, 2024. It is 3:04 p.m. Thank you for being here. We will not have any opening ceremonies. We're just going to go right into our action meeting and the purpose of this meeting, which is to discuss and possibly approve some changes or confirmations of employee benefits. And we will open this discussion with our city manager, Dan Jessen.
Okay, so, the main reason why we came was to discuss that 5-year, benefit that's there, but there'll probably be a little bit well, I don't know where there'll be more discussion. But the other, so basically there's two things we need to talk about. One is that, the other is we have an employer election, whether or not to pick up member contributions on Tier 2 public safety and firefighter contributory system. Of course, we don't have any firefighters that are full-time with benefits, so it's just public safety. So I don't know which one you guys want to talk about first. Is there a preference? Rochelle says let's do the police one first. So I realized after talking to a few of you that sometimes we throw around a lot of acronyms and a lot of stuff, so let me just explain a little bit how this all works. Utah Retirement Systems, which the city participates in, is the retirement for our citizens. There's a bunch of, for our employees, there's a bunch of different retirement systems that different employees are in, virtue of what they do. Tier 1 was the original. It used to just be the retirement system, but after the crash happened in 2008, they created a tiered system, Tier 1 for all existing employees on at that time, and Tier 2 for everybody after that. The reason they did that is because they realized they were dramatically underfunded, and the only way that they could get caught back up was to offer a lesser retirement for all new employees. So when I say Tier 2 employees, it is anybody hired on after a certain month and day of 2011, and I don't remember that day, but represents 9, soon to be 10, because we have a new power guy starting next week who will be who is also on Tier 2. When we were looking at this before, we just were looking at 9 because Brad, who is retired, yesterday was his last day, he was Tier 1. Anyways, Tier 2, we essentially have two type of employees. We have Tier 2, what they just call the public employment system, and we have, of course, some of our police officers that are in the public safety retirement system. Every year we are told the contribution rates that the city has to pay for every time we run a payroll. It's done electronically, and we are told we need to pay in a certain amount of money. Actually, we generate the report and send in the money electronically to URS and subject to audit. We hope that we do it right, because if we don't, later we have to pay the difference plus interest, and it can get expensive. Anyways, Utah Retirement has always been 100% paid by the employer in majority of systems that contribute. Back in 2020, when Tier 2 was created, the legislature set a ceiling, if you will, on the rate that could be paid in, and the rate changes every year based on their actuarial calculations of how much is needed to fund that employee's retirement right into the future. They tell us the rates, we program them into our system, and then we calculate the bill, send it off to the URS. They then take control of that money. Hopefully they grow it enough that there's actually enough money there to pay out that employee upon retirement. When they created Tier 2, they put a few check valves in place. I don't know why they did it, but they did it. That said, up to a certain percentage would be paid by the employer. Anything above that would be paid by the employee. The first time that came up was in 2020 for law enforcement, that they were going to go over that threshold that the legislature had put in place. So back then, we and every other city or whatever with a public safety group, police department, basically sheriff's department, whatever, had to elect whether they were going to pick up the amount above that cap or whether they were going to pass it on. Most agencies that I am familiar with or was familiar with decided to go ahead and pick up that amount. We had to do it by resolution, and the resolution that we passed basically said that we would pick it up, and at the time it was 2.27% was how much we had to pick up, or that would then come out of the employee's paycheck. So we did that, but in our resolution, what Callie just noticed after we had that conversation and we realized that we had a difference between the, law enforcement and the other, was that this year we have to make that election again, and we will have to every year if it ever goes above the rate that it is. And, this year it is moving to 4.73%, which is the required, pickup. Our own resolution caps us at 2.27. So, we have to decide whether to pick up the difference. If we do so, of course, we will pay out that difference. Employees won't notice it. If we don't pick it up, the employees would pick up the difference between that, which is about 2.26%. That basically just comes out of their own paycheck after they, or before they get their check, so it'd come off their gross. And, or would it come off their net?
Gross, I think.
Their gross.
Your tax. But
So-
can I just,
Yeah, go ahead.
so the resolution had a percentage cap. However, the form that we sent to URS said that we would pick up all of that, including any increases, so we actually are at 2.56,
5.9.
59, 2.59, instead of what is in the resolution.
But our resolution said that we were gonna cap it at that. The box, they give us on the election form, it just has, I don't have the current form, right? No, I don't have that form back then, but there was a box that just said all. Okay, okay. And that's the one that just had a box that said all, if we intended to pick it up, all of it, or we could handwrite in a different amount, and we hit clicked all. So, we now need to decide if we are going to do what, Callie?
So are we gonna pick up the 4.73, or is that what it is?
Yep, 4.73.
4.73.
Or just pick a different percentage?
We can pick a different percentage, but we cannot go lower than what we're already contributing.
Okay.
Not that, but that's.
We are contributing the 2.59, and we would have to, so we're somewhere in between those two numbers. This is similar to the .7 discussion that we had, but that discussion specifically applied to everybody else besides law enforcement that is in Tier 2. And that is, .7 instead of the difference in those two. So we already, but it's the same thing, only that's public employees, this is public safety, and we have to decide on this separately, because we have to make that election, so. It is slightly different though, because to choose to pick up the .7 is not making an election and sending it to URS. We would actually be, in that case, we would have to put an additional amount into their paycheck before it got taken back out of their paycheck. If we pick up this, we just pay that amount straight to URS, and it never comes, their paycheck never sees the difference. It's a kind of a messed up thing, but legislature was gonna pass a bill that would allow us to pick it up. They didn't. Most entities are just in a roundabout way picking it up by giving a slightly higher COLA. So that's the difference in those two things, but basically the cash to us is the same, one way or the other, in the .7 and the other. I mean, the amount is different, but I'm saying how much we pay to URS would be the same in either method. It's just calling one 6 and the other one half a dozen, but it's the same effect. But anyways, so that's that. I don't know if I explained it well. It's kind of convoluted, but that's the election that we need to make on that item.
The other thing I didn't know if we wanted to bring up is I know that the numbers that were presented to council on the .7 changed pretty significantly when we separated these two, and we basically listed the number of employees, and then I guess we're also adding another employee with our new hire. Is there, I mean, I'd leave it up to the council with this new information, it potentially changes that discussion, and I've had a few of you mention to me that, you know, you've looked at that and, you know, just again, different information than what we were presented a week ago. So if the council wants to discuss that, I feel like that can be on the table too, just because it was a pretty big difference in what that amount would be.
So Dan, what's the amount, if we go with the 4.73, what's the actual, do you have a dollar amount?
Yeah, and I sent that out. Let me just
Is
pull
it
up.
$47.50?
Boy.
I sent an email on it. I'll pull it up. 'Cause I don't wanna go off of my own memory.
Yeah, 47.50, sorry.
Is that what it was on the email?
And then on the, and then the other number was 5 employees, but it would be 6 employees, so I don't think we even have that number.
Well, it's, technically I'm tier 2, but I don't get COLAs, so, and what we were talking about was a COLA change, so it would be 5 employees, and it was like $1,600. At first I had said 3,800, or, that included law enforcement and me, and it shouldn't have included either. So when you remove me and law enforcement, it was like $1,600.
$1,675.
There you go.
So council, it's open discussion time, and it'd be great to hear from each one of you.
Well, I think in 2020, whenever it was that we agreed to pay for the police, that we kinda we did make a commitment to that. So I think that should carry forth. I think we need to pay the law enforcement that difference. So, what do you define it as, Dan? I mean, what's it called?
Just call it the full tier 2 pickup on law enforcement.
Okay, full 2-tier pickup on law enforcement, 'cause I think we addressed that in that salary discussion, and I think that,
Do you remember that conversation, Dave?
yeah. And, we elected to take care of that tier 2 law enforcement portion in full.
I'll agree with David, but I also think we should pay the .7 for the employees also.
I would have to agree with you on that too, because if we're gonna pick up the law enforcement, which I didn't know we were already doing that, at that time, I feel like it's only fair that we pick up the .7 for the others as well.
Exactly.
Yeah, I'm with you too.
Well, me too.
Well, hallelujah, we,
Oh, I wasn't gonna say anything, but I was gonna bring that up, that we should just make it uniform.
So if we're ready to make a motion, we can make a motion on this.
I make a motion to accept the pickup for the police department and the tier 2 employees with the city also.
Should you say the percent point? It's gonna change
0.7%.
every year.
So,
yeah, how do you want
the
that?
way, say it like this, the .7 would be an additional COLA.
Okay.
The other is a pickup.
Okay.
So maybe we need to make 2 separate motions.
It'd probably be good.
Do the 4.73 for the police, you want that
Yeah,
out too?
as a pickup, yeah.
Okay, I make a motion to accept the 4.73% pickup for the police department, and then add 0.7% to the COLA for the pickup for the tier 2 employees. How's that?
I second it.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, thank you, the motion carries. All right, now moving to the discussion about I forgot what we actually just called it.
So this is the discussion on the
The
5-year
5-year insurance.
deal. And I sent out an email, of course, I haven't sent anything else out about this, but just to kind of remind everybody of, I've been thinking about how to best, go about discussing this, and I think the best way to do it is to look at it in terms of options. So we have the policy that says that if you have, and I don't wanna go into all of the different versions of it, but essentially, the intent was to have a 5-year of health benefits, medical coverage, post-retirement, and it was if you retire, not when you separate, but when you retire. And there was some things that were qualifiers of that, and those qualifiers are the things that have changed a little bit, and the definition of what qualifies are the kind of the questions that we would have to decide on how to do that. The qualifiers have been such as 15 years. At one point in time, it was tied to number of hours that you had accumulated that were unused. Both of those seem to change depending on what you're looking at. And also, if you have other insurance options, then you wouldn't get it at that point. And those range from Medicaid, Medicare, other available insurance, what does that mean? And then subsequent insurance from subsequent employment. So we just need to kind of look at that and decide, is this a policy that we want to keep? So these are basically the options that I could really think of, and I wanted to just summarize them again. Option 1 is to keep that current policy in place, but better define it. And by better defining it, you are deciding what it's going to look like, right? So 1 is it's in place the way it was intended, and we just say whether it's 15 years, whether it's 960 hours, and what things, if you have in place, you don't get it, right?
Does that include in that option the sick leave number, or does that not include like that 900 or whatever sick leave?
No, it would have to be defined.
Okay.
Whether that is a factor, whether it's just based on years, or whether it's based on accumulated hours, or one or the other, or both or neither. Obviously, neither would make it. Everybody gets it when they retire. And then we have to decide whether, if we go that option of what qualifies as other insurance, that means that you wouldn't get it, right? So that's option 1. Option 1A is pretty similar to that, but it's more defined as a safety net. And when I call this the safety net option, what I mean is we would have to create a mechanism, but we would call it that. But if you don't qualify based on what you have when you retire, but that changes like 2 years in and then you need it again, that we would have some mechanism to provide it. So think of the safety net of you could actually restrict it to you have other insurance available to you when you retire. You are covered under something without paying money for it, right? So you don't need the safety net. If that was the case, you would say you have coverage from like Medicaid, Medicare, your spouse insurance, or subsequent employment insurance, but that's it. You would you literally have coverage, so you don't need it. But that means you have no coverage from the city when you leave. The reason why this is an important option to consider, the difference between it and 1A, the difference between 1A and 1 is that we can't put somebody back on our insurance a year in if they lose that other coverage. Our insurance company will not let us. So if we call it a true safety net, the advantage of the true safety net is we're not paying out anything in those scenarios unless and if they then lose that other coverage. And then we would have to pay something. But we would then have to fund it. Okay? If we were to do that, my thought would be is that we would at that point start funding an equivalent dollar amount into a health retirement account, or they would go pick up something on the marketplace and we would pay for that up to whatever they would get if they were here, right? So that's 1A, the safety net option. Option 1, it's like it is now, we just define what it is, right? Option 1A is the safety net. Option 1B is the same as option 1, only we freeze it at the current rates, which protects us from the increases, the cost of the increases. The employee would pick up the difference. So if it goes up like it did this year, it went up 5.5%. Next year, the employee would pay that additional 5.5%. That would at least limit our liability, right? So those are option 1, 1A, and 1B. Option 2 is, this really should be option 1C, I'm sorry. It's basically the same thing as above for all existing employees, or like this is the grandfather option, where you say, we intend on doing something new in the future, but we're gonna grandfather the existing employees into whatever we wanna do, whether it's option 1, 1A, or 1B, right? And, then what do you do for the others that you don't grandfather? Do we just sunset this benefit completely for any new employee hired? Or do we, and I would say if you're gonna grandfather, you gotta decide how you're gonna grandfather it, you know? Anybody who's vested right now based on their years of service, and, you know, or do you say, we're just gonna grandfather all existing employees, because when they hired on, that was the benefit package they thought they were getting, right? So just think about that, the grandfather option, and what would you do for new employees? Something or nothing, right? 3 and 3A are a whole different concept, and those are this. That's where you take their accumulated hours and you monetize them. You give them some sort of a value. Let's say you give them a value of $25. That's just out of the blue number. If you gave, let's say somebody had 960 hours, and you monetize that by $25 an hour, that would give them a budget, if you will, of $24,000. You then say, you go get your own insurance in the marketplace. After you've used, and we'll pay that every month until you've used up your amount. We don't care whether you've monetized 960 hours, 1,500 hours, or 200 hours, right? It's just gonna get an amount, and that's how much you get until it's paid up, and at that point, they could just take over the financial responsibility of their own insurance from that point on through the marketplace. Of course, until Medicaid or whatever they get on, right? The 3A option is the same as above. You monetize it, but instead of going into the marketplace, we just put money into an HRA, and we just forget it. They do what they want with it. It is in a health retirement account, which has to be used for health stuff. I would say if we do that, we would divide up the monetized amount over 5 years and pay it in over 5 years. One of the things I really don't want to do is monetize something, come up with this big chunk of money, and write a check, even into an HRA. That's a lot of money we're paying out all at once. I'd rather monetize it over 5 years. Those are some options. I got to give Bill at Hub most of the credit for those options. I tweaked them and modified them a little bit, and of course we can come up with something else, but I don't know. That's just some food for thought of where to go from here, depending on what you guys want to do, what your goal is.
And from what I understood from the email he sent out and I shared with the council, coming off and coming back on later was never even a product they provided.
No.
Do you know what other?
Well, we probably didn't even have them when this policy was created anyways. I mean, sorry.
Do you know what other communities do? Like the county, Enid or Cedar City, just to get?
The county doesn't have anything like this. The school district has something like this. Do you know what it is?
I don't know how many years of service. It's 25, maybe 30, but they do provide 5 years of insurance after you retire, unless you get picked up by another insurance company as well. So like if...
And they cap it at 65, and so if you take it when you're 63, you only get 2 years.
That is true, yep.
Age-wise.
Yes, age-wise. But you have to be vested at least, for me, it's 30 years. I think other employees, whenever they came on, it was 25 years. But now it's 30.
Well, I think we should define a year, how many years a retirement is, 25 or 30. I personally think it should be 30 years for retirement.
I would think that you would want to make sure you didn't go past the retirement age. Like we have, like law enforcement retirement is at 25 years.
Well, And they're different, almost every place is, with police.
Dan, let me throw this one out, and it's probably like, I don't know, in your 3 category or something. But what if you do away with the post insurance, and you create, and this is what you were talking about, you create a employee medical trust or health where you pay into it every year for every year they are employed, and then how many years they work is what there is there, and you budget that, so it's in your budget, so it's fixed, you're not gonna get hit with this, you know, increase or whatever, so that you just budget a certain fixed amount that you put into an account, and then when they retire, it's theirs to do with what they want, and you don't have the program.
So when you say that, do you mean not insurance dependent, like let's say my spouse has insurance, I still would have my HRA?
Yeah,
Okay.
and that way you're just able to fix, you know, budget it and it's fixed, and then if they need it, if they don't. But it's an amount that you can plan on and budget each year.
That you're paying into.
Right.
So if you're here for 30 years, you would get budgeted 30 years,
You
Of
get
that amount.
you'd get that amount.
that amount.
Somebody's here for 10 years, you know, you get that amount. I don't know if they, have to, I don't know if there's a time element, like 10 years or something, or what?
So, a couple of things. One thing about that is, so anything we do is gonna have its upsides and its downsides, right?
Mm-hmm.
The advantage of that is, Addie, do you care if I pick on you? We don't talk about specific employees, but he's here and he's giving me a thumbs up. So Addie worked a career before he came into law enforcement. How old were you at Post? 41. He went into Post with all the young bucks, and he outshot them all, and they may have sent him home with bruises at night from wrestling with him. But, so he started in late in his career, but he's still tier 1, but just barely, right? He's not gonna work 30 years. He's not even gonna work 25 years, especially at Parowan. Now I'm just gonna go to a theoretical law enforcement, person that we may hire away from, say, the county or from Cedar City. They're gonna be with us for maybe 5 or 10 years or something like that. They're gonna work 25 years or 30 years in somewhere, but they may only work for us for 10 or 15. The advantage of that plan is you're giving them something. There are employees that start work for us right out of high school. It's probably the exception to the rule rather than the rule, that they work their entire career with us. So, at the school, I think it's a little different. Generally speaking, a teacher will get hired on and then stay with the school. Sometimes they'll move from another district somewhere else and then start with us. But anyways, I'm just throwing that out.
But I guess I'm just saying this avoids the fact you don't know when people are gonna retire and how, you know, and so it avoids that unknown. You can make things more of a consistent, planned, you know, budgeted kind of a process.
But are you saying we would set money aside every year?
You pay them, yeah, and do an account.
Or just upon their retirement?
It'd go into an account that they'd have access to when they retired.
So kinda like what you were saying, like that HRA,
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, it's similar, but it's,
similar.
yeah.
So you put like 250 or 200 or whatever the number you choose it to be.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
a percentage of.
But does it correlate with sick time, because the concern that people will just come to work sick to not lose any of those hours?
So that side has your advantage and your disadvantage. On one hand, if somebody accumulates a whole bunch of sick hours because we've incentivized them to not use it, then, you know, then they've come to work sick, but they've been a reliable employee. Usually, they've been here, right? On the other hand, if you don't have any correlation to sick hours, somebody can just abuse the system and then still get this benefit. And I'm not saying that employees do that, but it happens,
Yeah.
right? So, what do you want to incentivize? is gonna change the behavior that you're gonna get. It just is, it's the law of incentives.
Which is nice, though, when you tie your sick leave into years of service, what remaining hours you have left over, you put that towards years of service.
Yeah.
On an 8-hour day, you can divide that and find out how many extra days you get added to it.
Let me put it this way, you either have to tie it to years of service totally, or just look at accumulated sick hours and monetize that. The reason I say probably either or is because, otherwise somebody comes here and works for 4 years, they don't have any accumulated sick hours. You know what I'm saying? You go one or the other, and you're basically, you want to reward loyalty and longevity with the city to some degree, right? If they've only been here for 4 years and they haven't accumulated any sick leave, they're not gonna have much of a benefit. In fact, I would think you would still wanna put some sort of de minimis number on here, so that we're not going through the whole point of setting up this administrative payout if they have 20 hours when they leave. You know what I'm saying? It doesn't seem like it makes a lot of sense to set up an HRA and do all of this work if they don't really have much saved up.
The other question I wondered about is historically, what was the vehicle that funded that? Was it just, I mean, there was nothing being paid in, so what vehicle funded those payouts?
Which would have come out of the benefits line item for the department that they worked for, or the split that they had.
So if you hired a new person, you had to increase that line item to cover the new person and the retiring person.
Yeah.
But you were doing it pretty much on the fly.
Absolutely.
And that's where we're saying kind of for the future, it leaves us with this unknown, the way it's set up now.
Yep.
And how many people potentially could do it at the same time. And, I mean, 'cause even two with
The
an
only way you
unknown.
figure that was to look at average number of retirees and figure in any given 5-year window who could qualify. I mean, it's not like everybody could retire all at once and be on there. I guess it's possible that you could have more employees retire at a kind of a wave and then off. So that's kind of your risk, but you're never going to have everybody retire at once. Not everybody can qualify for retirement at once. So it's not even possible that everybody would retire at once.
Well, I'm saying even 2 or 3 at a time could.
You could have
That
2 or
would be a
3 at a
pretty
time.
significant, 'cause you'd also have to provide benefits for the new people too.
Yeah. Exactly. No, you're right.
So that's why I wondered what was the funding mechanism for this program before we were looking at it. So you're saying that it was just money that was in there from benefits for each department?
Yeah, no funding mechanism, just operating budget.
So that $960 you keep mentioning, is that sick hours?
Hours of
Just
accumulated unused sick
Sick
hours.
hours.
So we cap how many vacation hours they can roll from year to year. We cap that at 200 or 260 for law enforcement, which is use it or lose it. That doesn't accumulate.
Okay.
We do not cap sick hours because we don't want to, it's never had a cash value, so it didn't matter that you capped it. And from an employee standpoint, if we capped sick hours, what it would do is this: people would use them more, which means they would be unavailable more to us to work hours, and they would not have a buffer. So the nice thing about letting their sick hours accumulate, if you have somebody that has a major medical event, you know, usually you have those later in your career. That's just how our human body works. You have a little bit of a safety net before you have to go on, permanent leave without pay. And so that's something that people in the back of their mind think, hey, if I end up with, whatever, I don't want to say because it's all too real for us in a lot of ways, you have a little bit of a safety net.
But isn't this health insurance tied to the sick hours, sick leave?
This policy at one point was tied to 960 hours.
Yeah.
When that resolution was passed in 2012, where it kind of tweaked it, it didn't say anything about the 960 hours. Yet our policy still does. So we weren't sure whether the policy should have been modified based on that resolution, or did it switch back, and we didn't find any evidence of it. So we have a resolution that is inconsistent with our current version. One of them says 960 hours, the other says just 15 years.
So which one are we going by?
That's what we gotta decide.
We gotta figure that out.
That's one of the things we gotta decide if we're doing this, and what it's gonna, how do you qualify? We have to
What
define
one's
that.
been what one is being used now?
We don't have anybody on it right now.
According to the most recent person.
Right, I'm saying as of today, we don't have anybody on it. I don't know what we did, and I don't wanna mention specific employees' names, but the most recent one, I don't know what was used to, they got it, they qualified for it until they kicked into another system.
And the other question I had is, and not to speak of any particular employee, but this has come up in a few employee meetings, and I thought it was really kind. But if you didn't have the hours weren't a consideration, you could actually almost allow someone else to inherit those, more or less. You donate them to somebody who might need them, and that had been the practice.
So we wanna make a policy on this. We have had a policy that's in, I don't know if there's anything written on donated hours. There is. Not at a max amount that can be donated. Let me tell you why the hours are donated. You get somebody who has a major event that happens, and a lot of times we'll ask, does anybody wanna donate some sick leave to that employee? Because they bottom out their sick hours at 0, and at that point they go off with, they either go on to a leave without pay, or they kick into FMLA, the Family Medical Leave Act, which protects their job. They don't get paid, but it protects their job for a certain period of time before they then we're able to replace them and let them go completely. So being able to donate hours when something happens, I remember at the county, the county was a lot larger, we had a lot of employees, and there was somebody in Parowan that was involved in a major accident, and nobody knew whether that employee would be able to recover from it or not. They used up their sick hours. There was a bunch of hours that were donated until it was realized that they weren't ever gonna come back. But after a while, was able to pick up a Medicare, Medicaid, disability or something like that, and then they went off completely. But that's why we would allow somebody to donate.
So if we had a person with 960 hours and a person with 100 hours, they both retire at the same time, would we put in over 5 years to the HRA account, divide 5 years into 960 for that person, and then 5 years if they only had 100 hours for that person?
Yeah, if we did that option 3, like David was talking about.
Then what happens to the 960 hours?
So their hours would just be monetized. You just turn those into a number, and we would then pay it into a...
Well, the point is, my question is, the point is in his example, in John's example, you have 960 hours and you have 100 hours. So the person that has 100 hours gets more benefit than the person that has 960 hours.
No, because you've converted it to money.
Okay.
So let me just tell you what it would be. In that example of $25, and I don't even know if that's like the right amount, the one would get a benefit of $24,000 put into an HRA over some period of time. The other would get $2,500 put into an HRA, which, so it's, you're tying it to their accrued hours, and that's a form of fairness, right? You could also do the same thing by number of years worked. You could say anything over 10 years worked at the city, we're gonna monetize years worked at the city and create some sort of a benefit that way.
That's what they did with mine when I retired. I got my retirement, 'cause I had the 30 years in, and then I got $3,800 a year for HRA.
Oh, okay. So that's an option 3C, or B.
So, I'm just gonna ask, go ahead, Sharon.
But I had to go get, and I was under Medicare, I had to go get my own insurance.
Yeah.
I did not get any money
Mhm.
to go pay for that. I had to pay for it myself because I'm the one that chose to retire before Medicare.
Right.
And it's expensive.
So did they just write you a check, 3,800 times 30?
No, they have a company that they send it to, and every month, as long as I go through them, they, you know, like with my, prescriptions and my Medicare, they reimburse me every month for it. It's an automatic reimbursement.
Yeah, the advantage of that is that they're not doing a lump sum payment either. They're probably just
No, they're not.
subscribing to a
They
plan
do it
with a
every year.
third
They
party
add
company.
that $3,800 every year.
That makes
Yeah.
sense.
And it is nice, I will say that is nice to help pay for prescriptions.
I have a question on the vacation. Employees separated from employment shall be compensated for all accrued annual vacation leave. What does that mean?
That's what we,
Full rate?
that's what we just did last time,
So
in the last meeting. Their accumulated vacation, we just pay it out upon separation.
at full rate.
Yeah, so if you have 200 hours and you make $10 an hour, you're gonna get a check for $2,000 minus taxes. And that's separate obviously, but yeah.
But hadn't they been practicing, they were only doing half of what they
Yes.
had, but we just changed it back to giving the full amount.
We
Up
felt
to
we should get
up to the annual carryover cap.
So the manual, the policy book is not the, like, things are changed in this that
Oh, definitely.
are not that are in practice that are not changed on the paper part. So it says full in here, but they were doing
50%.
They were doing 50% of what they had. But we just moved it back. Whenever that was, last week.
Last council.
Okay.
Oh, yes, moving forward.
So if we decide so there's really kind of two options. There's a monetized thing, and then there's a few details to figure out, or there's the original plan figured out. Depending on which kind of road we wanna go down, we have to answer different questions. So that's probably the best place to start. 'Cause if we're gonna go down to the original, option, we have to define what would make you not qualify for it, and that's a huge one. Sorry, you were gonna say something, Rochelle.
I was just gonna say, I'm kind of, I don't know where I'm leaning. I don't know. I was
And
kind of leaning
we don't
more
have to decide
just,
this tonight either, but
Yeah.
it would be good to get somewhere
right.
and have a direction. Or assign staff to research some options, but we need to narrow it down and kind of what we're thinking about.
Well, I think we need to come up, if we're gonna do a retirement years of service, because someone that only retires at 14 years of service shouldn't get the same benefits as someone at 30 years, or even 25.
Even if they've worked for the city for, I'm not saying that we have any employees like these, but say that they work for the city for 25 years, but they're a crappy employee.
Doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter. I kinda like the idea of the sick leave and monetizing that and putting that into an account. But
I just
I'm-
find it a little odd that some of the employees don't take the insurance and they take a cash value instead. Why do they never set it up where when they retire, they can continue the cash value? Like, to me, that's fair. It's like, ones need the insurance, one wants the cash. Why didn't they ever split it that way?
So that kinda goes to this safety net concept. And that's a question of what, on the safety net concept, because right now, we provide every employee insurance or some value thereof if they have other insurance. that's kinda controversial, right? But most cities and municipalities and stuff do it as a retention policy. But the idea is that you're giving them something, whether they have some other insurance, but is that other insurance as good as the city insurance, but then they take the cash? But right now, if they leave and they have other insurance, they've been getting a cash value up until the time they retire, and then when they leave, they would get nothing, obviously.
Right.
Unless you would say, we will continue to give some sort of a cash value, but now you're putting a cash value on it, so we gotta define what that is.
So I'm gonna throw a wrench in the, so if a person has 10 years and has 500 hours accumulated, and a person has 20 years, but you know, he's been sick here and there and everywhere, and he has 0,
Mhm.
and both of them retire at the exact same time,
Mhm.
the guy with 10 years is gonna get a HRA account for 5 years, and the other guy gets nothing.
Under the option 3, yeah.
I don't like that one, 'cause you're not.
You don't like that one, or you do like that one?
I feel that the person that has 20 years, but you know, gets a cold or the flu once in a while, or COVID and whatever, he gets nothing after 20 years, and the person that has 10 years gets 5 years worth of.
If you're just tying it to accumulated hours.
Yes.
That's correct.
So I would say.
And there are times where, I didn't wanna paint it that the only time people have 0 hours accumulated is because they are abusing the system. Some people are sicker than other people. They have ailments they deal with, and they burn their sick time up. They may be a great employee and have burned up sick time. Nicole is back there. No, I shouldn't say that. So, or you have COVID and you burn up all your hours. Like, it totally happens. So we have to be, so you have to be careful in thinking about, we have to come up with the best policy, and then we just need to enforce good sick leave approvals or not, based on doctor's notes and all that stuff, and then ignore the person who's really good at gaming the system. We just need a good policy. Let us enforce the other as best we can. Because you hate to get into a policy where you're like trying to use your policy to get people who are gaming the system, 'cause you're gonna get good people too in that same,
So basically, if you grandfather what's happening right now with what they've signed on 15 years insurance if they qualify with the numbers, there is no cash value, so.
Right. It's just insurance for 5 years.
Right.
But we have some problems in how to interpret that.
Right.
But that's an option.
But we need to define that, but maybe we grandfather that in.
But no matter what, they deserve that, like that has to get, and we gotta find at what point, is it all of them from this point on? Or what?
But see, that's why it matters to decide if you're gonna go the monetized route or the old 5-year route first.
Only other part of it is, we can't do what we said we were going to do if they're gonna stay on our same insurance. We'd still have to do something different with Bill Phelps to be able to offer what we're saying. I mean, at least it would have to be without interruption.
We can have somebody on our insurance with PEHP if they're on PEHP when they retire. That is a thing.
But you're saying the concern with that is in the future, let's say we did have a double-digit rate increase.
No, that is one of the concerns. One of the concerns is that we have no idea how to say exactly how much that costs, other than to estimate what the increases will be. So it's hard to put, like, we should have a liability on our balance sheet for that. The problem is we don't know where to put that liability, because we do not know which employees will use it and which won't, and what the future rate increases will be. So it's really hard to try to come up with that number. But like unused vacation, we literally have to have that on our balance sheet as a liability to the city, because we will have to pay that out at some point upon separation, right? This one is really vague as far as how we would figure that out. So that's one of the questions. The other question is what if they are receiving an opt-out upon the time they retire, if we keep the old system? The only reason they can even qualify for an opt-out right now is that they have other coverage.
Did you say they could keep the PEHP?
If they're on it when they
If they're on it
retire.
now, they could keep it?
Mm-hmm.
Uh-huh,
Would
but
they still, would they? Okay. It wouldn't be the same rates that the city has, though.
Does it cover, spouse? Children or anything?
our current policy says spouse. That is one thing that isn't vague. Our current policy says spouse, if applicable. It says nothing about family or kids.
'Cause typically you wouldn't have kids if you're retiring.
Generally, when you're
Typically.
retiring, you don't have kids at home that qualify.
But it happens.
But you need to spell it out, we need to, though.
And it's, our current policy is always, any time it's ever been referenced, it said and spouse.
But payouts are still very hard to predict, and they're very expensive. You can't budget for them.
Right.
That's
That's
the
what's hard.
problem.
Well, you just budget each year like we do. I have this massive complex spreadsheet that has all the departments, all the employees, everything that we're doing across the year, and creates all the benefits and all that stuff. We would just have to say, this year we still have X employee on, we expect them to still be on for 12 months, and this is their rate, and we'd budget it into that department.
But I mean a payout, if they were to retire, if you had a
Oh,
group of them retire, you can't budget for that.
you can't budget for a lump sum, you have to you have to discount the future payout somehow, based on some assumptions. But if you tie it to accumulated hours or years of service, that's something that you could calculate really easy.
So years of service seems to me fair way to think about things. For instance, if you have a person 10 years and you put $1,000 each year into an HRA account, when he leaves over 5 years, it'd be $10,000, and then the 20-year, it'd be $20,000, but you'd pay into it for 5 years instead of just a lump sum at the day of retirement. Because when they retire, just say if you retire at 62, you still have to get insurance until you're 65. It all depends on your wages, how much you're making after you retire, is how much insurance is.
Yep.
And don't we need to treat, like, the police department separate from this? Because of their retirement, like years of service to retire, or? if
I would
they're
say actually no, and I'll tell you why. Because they still have Medicaid and Medicare picking up at the same ages. They can retire earlier. You're more likely to actually have a police officer who wants this coverage for 5 years, because they're probably gonna retire 5 years, 10 years earlier. They can retire 10 years from the city with full retirement, 10 years earlier than a public employee, which means they're gonna have a longer gap with no insurance. Let's say they go into business by themselves, or they just become a full-time fisherman or whatever. They're gonna need the 5 years more than the offset. But I don't know how you'd. I think just by virtue of the fact that they would probably use the 5 years more often than other employees, it probably gives them a little better benefit. Because I think our intent would still be, once you qualify for Medicaid or Medicare, you come off anyways, right? If we stick with the traditional option that we've had, the 5-year traditional option. If we monetize it, we don't care, because we throw it into an HRA and walk away from it.
Right.
So we
Even at
have an
5 years.
employee that wanted to come up and... Well, you have to.
If you wanna come up
speak
to
into
the mic.
microphone.
Okay, so I'm really confused because
So are we.
any of us employees that were from 2011, and that's really the ones that's gonna affect, we were told you have 960 or 80 hours, whatever it is, you will have 5 years insurance when you retire. Now, that would take, so we figure, oh, okay, we're gonna retire at 65. We will have our Medicaid or Medicare, whatever that one is, but we will have that as our secondary, because when you have to have a secondary insurance. So that was our 5 years of secondary insurance money that we were gonna have. Now, I don't know if I missed that meeting after 2011, that this was taken away from us, but all of us employees that were here before then, that's what was told to us, that if you had them, you would get. So we've all, I'm pretty sure, I mean, I had 2 knee surgeries, so I'm a little short on mine, but I still have many years, but the ones that are retiring, that's what we were told. And I don't know when it was not.
Kelly, can you look at, I think the original policy said once you had Medicaid or Medicare, you didn't get it though, the original policy.
Yeah, see, we were never told that. We were told, and it was after, like they said, Nancy, and what happened with that situation. That's when it was,
Well, I don't know what you were originally told, but if that original policy said that,
okay.
we have to stick to with whatever that original policy said. Wait, now it's Judy's turn, come up.
So I brought this up last year, or earlier in this year, I'm sorry, I'm very upset about this. And I was told, you have other insurance, you aren't gonna get this. It's a privilege, not whatever. So I went ahead and had knee surgery because I didn't have to have 960 hours because I was never gonna get it. So I used my hours, and now you're gonna go back on that. When I had saved for 30 years thinking this was the policy.
So okay, will you repeat that for me? Sorry,
Okay.
I have to
I have
wrap my
saved,
finger around it.
okay, first of all, I didn't take the insurance, which saved the city thousands of dollars, because it's only half the premium. So I have saved the city thousands of dollars. For 30 years, I kept my sick leave because I was told 960 hours, when you retire, you would get that insurance. I asked at the first of this year which policy they were going to go by, and they said, you won't qualify because it says here, if you have other insurance. And my husband has other insurance. But my husband didn't work for my insurance, I did. So I was told I wasn't going to get it, so I went ahead and had knee surgery. Now I don't have my 960 hours after 30 years of savings because I was told I wasn't going to get it. So.
Yeah, that's a beef I have with it too, so.
Well, and my beef, if we're gonna talk beefs, is every employee I've talked to had a different understanding. So do we honor according to the understanding of each individual employee? Because that's the only way to make it fair. I mean, if fair is the goal.
So, and I think, so there's
Jeremy, are we
there's
gonna
definitely
hear from
something
you?
to say about, but I mean, every employee that has some understanding and is expecting something, their opinion matters, right?
Yes.
We can see that if you've worked here for a long time and you've been planning on this your whole career, that means a lot, right?
Right.
Right.
But it doesn't mean that an employee that's only been here for 10 years and was also expecting to earn that before they retired,
Yeah,
that doesn't matter to them too. That's all I'm saying.
yeah, I just have a quick, point that I kinda remember during the 2011, 2012 resolution. I think the reason that was brought up is we had an employee at the time that had been sick a lot, and so her hours were under the 960. And so to help her with insurance, 'cause she had this, and she was at retirement, she had 30-plus years, to help her with her insurance moving forward, they said, let's change it, go away from 960 hours and say 15 years of service. I think that was the point of that resolution, from what I remember back in 2011 and 12, which I'm pretty sure is the time that this individual retired. I don't wanna say names, but I believe that's what triggered that, just by timing, but I'm not sure on that resolution, but.
And then from a recorder standpoint, does the resolution trump the employee handbook, or does the employee handbook trump the resolution? Because the resolution is what removed the 960 hours.
And it was voted on by council. There is the
Yeah.
vote, and so I would think that is what.
And that's what's hard to navigate, because then the next
Well,
version of the handbook had the 960 hours in it
Yeah,
again.
I don't want, that's why I don't
And-
wanna complicate it more, I just wanna bring that.
So
to
I don't know
Dan.
from a legal perspective what trumps what,
Yeah,
and was the more recent handbook ever brought to council?
yeah, well, and then talking to Dan about this more, I think he was kinda interpreting, was like, was the resolution just an addition to that? Like, it didn't address the whole thing, or was it just put in 15 years?
Was it meant to take the old policy, throw it in the trash and insert a new one?
Yeah, that's what I
Should we have amended our policy when that resolution was done? The resolution doesn't mention the actual manual, but
Yeah,
was that the
I think
intent?
that's the intent
Nobody's
of
here
that
that was here then.
resolution was, this individual has been here a long time, has had to use their sick leave, and now they don't have this option, so we'd like to give them insurance. Let's change the policy to 15 years, 'cause she has that.
So that's what that
They-
That
resolution
sounds like the
says.
intention of that resolution was very specific.
To me, the
Yeah,
resolution's
and so that trumped the 960 hours the way I read it, and I've been here probably as long as anybody up here, I guess. That's what I recall. Yeah. And then one thing I was thinking about on the HRA, like if you give a larger monetary benefit to a person with a lot of sick leave hours, that individual is no longer gonna donate to somebody that needs them,
Right,
because they get this value now.
right, it can't double dip on
And I
that.
like the idea of donating when it's necessary and when it's needed.
And it wouldn't be an intention that they would, it just would mean the city would have to pay it twice. I don't mean that would be their intention,
Right.
but from a monetary perspective, the city would pay it twice.
And as an individual perspective with a lot of hours, I'm like, well, I need this for the next couple of years to get me through to Medicaid, Medicare, whichever one it is. I'm gonna be less likely to donate.
God, is it Medicare? So I think
John?
we all say both each time, just to be sure we're right, but the goal is to meet that gap for Medicare. And usually that's 65, and that was designed by policy that it doesn't continue after 65. So when the person bridges and goes to 65, they can't do the wait till they're a little bit older to get more Social Security. You know how you have that option. And so that was the goal, I believe, of the policy. But the problem, it's very problematic regardless, is there are people who at 15 years are 45 years old or 48 years old. They're not 60 years old
Yeah,
at 15 years.
yep. And to kinda reiterate what Judy had to say, like any other insurance in the policy, my wife currently has insurance, and so I feel like I've been here for 20 years and I have a lot of sick leave. So with my wife having insurance, the way Dan interprets the policy versus how I do, like since she has insurance, I won't get this benefit, and somebody whose wife doesn't have insurance would get that benefit,
Yeah, it's not fair.
Or husband.
It's not fair.
you know.
Yeah.
There should be a cash value.
But at the same time, I'm very thankful my wife has insurance, and so.
And you're very
You know.
thankful you have a wife.
Exactly.
You might wanna add
Very-
that.
Very thankful for that. So, just some input. I don't wanna confuse it anymore, but I do believe that's why that resolution was, the intention of that resolution.
And from my perspective, I'm new, I'm 2 years and 5 months in, and I have heard so many stories, and my biggest problem is a misunderstanding that I can't find any consistency to, and now we're sitting here trying to solve this. And the last thing I want is for people to walk away feeling like Judy just expressed. You
Yeah, your
know,
input.
That's rotten. I don't like that at all. So I'm like, as a council, and I don't know if everyone's heads are in the same place, I just wanna know what we do moving forward.
Yeah.
And if it's, Dan's
And-
saying that,
and
do we
communicate.
daylight it after this and say, hey, we don't do this anymore? Or do we figure out some kind of, model that we can budget for, that we can have a mechanism to put that money in? So, 'cause at this point right now, we don't really have a budget for it. We just respond if it happens. And that isn't, Dan, you tell me, is that good budgeting?
No.
You're the budget guy.
Well, no, we'd rather fund something over time, whether it's,
Yeah.
but it all depends on the structure of it, because if it's an unknown whether it's gonna happen, and then we put a bunch of money away, and that doesn't happen, set that money aside for that benefit. You can't just then, especially if you dedicate it to that employee. I'm just saying, we have to appropriately fund what policy we pick.
And if you wanted to donate your sick time, you would be donating, if it were monetized, you'd be donating that amount of your money essentially.
Yeah.
So that's another thing to
But if
consider.
it does just go off of 15 years of service with the city, you'd only have to budget at that time the people that have more than 15 years, right? And then as somebody encroaches on the 15-year mark, then you have to start budgeting for them, because if they retired without the 15 years, they don't get it anyway.
But what do you do with the employees that are still here that were told they were gonna be grandfathered into it, and it was not put in writing?
And that it
Not
wasn't
one-
safety net, it was
Not one
secondary.
or two, There's 4 or 5 or 6 employees that were told that
Yeah,
That were told that they'd have insurance after,
for 5 years.
but only if they didn't have other coverage.
well, originally,
No.
I think in the
No.
O2 policy that
No.
I signed, I don't think it had any of the other coverage. But like Dan has always said, what was the intent of the council at the time, which is hard to know.
Yeah.
But I think, was it to get you closer to Medicare? Was that the intent?
So they were told that they would get insurance for 5 years after, no matter what.
If you had 960 hours, you would,
If you had
would get 5 years of
960 hours.
insurance after
But
retirement.
that's where Judy's coming in, is like,
The 960 hours were not relevant.
Well, the
it's-
resolution.
We were under the impression that the 2011 or
Yeah.
12 resolution trumped the 960
Yeah.
hours.
Yeah.
what a
So I
thing.
think
Yeah,
you have
exactly.
appropriately wrapped your minds around
Yeah.
the mess that this is. And it's not just easy, snap your fingers, because it's gonna affect different people differently.
That's why we did the police talk first.
Yep, that's why we got that one out of the way first.
So,
'Cause that one had to be decided tonight.
sorry,
No, you're great.
head's turning. So, here's a question. So, the yearly, so why penalize somebody if they have 30 years, they retire at 65, they get Medicare, why penalize them not so, okay, Judy, sorry. So,
They got nothing else for it.
so if you have 30 years, you turn 65, if the city put in so much per year for that employee, just say $1,000 a year, so 30 years, that's $30,000. And over 5 years after that retirement, that person would get $5,000 a year for 5 years until you're 70 years old. Does that make sense? Does that make sense? Or is that just bizarre?
It's clear as mud.
Because it actually costs money, Medicare isn't, it still costs a couple $100, for a supplement, Medicare supplement.
So we're trying to monetize the years of service
Yes.
into like an amount that we would put into an account for them that they would get over a 5-year period after they
It'd
retire.
be a HRA account over 5
So
years.
this would be regardless of if they had insurance or not, or if they needed benefits or not.
Yeah,
It would
if
just
they
be
had
across the
insurance or
board.
not.
It'd be across
Yeah.
the board, 'cause if somebody
They
puts
got
in
it.
30 years and they're 65, and they should be rewarded that. They shouldn't be penalized because they can't, you have to take Medicare before a regular insurance.
So, and if we create a benefit that everybody gets, that's really a rich benefit, meaning it's costing a lot of money, then they get it regardless, now you're talking about some real money to budget for, to not just budget for, but to fund, right? I think the reason, I don't know if the reason, I think the reason why the language was added in 2012 that said, unless you have these other types of insurance, 'cause that basically lets the city off the hook if they have other insurance, right? And that's why the rub of employees that were here and had qualified at that point were like, wait a minute, I'm now losing something that I had before that, right? That was planned on. But that basically took the city from we're only gonna ever have to actually have a cost payout of this under certain scenarios. If we say everybody gets it and this is how much it is, now you're basically committing the city to do that for everybody who retires. And now there will be for sure money for all of those. Then you gotta pay really close attention to how much that's gonna cost if we're gonna do that. Because it's a guaranteed payout.
Is it a possibility to grandfather those people in on the old way before it was changed, and then like grandfather like Judy and,
Well, but
like, you know what I mean? I
you
don't
could,
know.
you would just have to decide who gets grandfathered and how you would do it. Would you say anybody who was employed before that policy changed, or would you say anybody who had 960 hours upon that thing? How did you vest? Or they were here for 15 years before that was changed. You'd have to decide how you're gonna, grandfather, if you want a grandfather.
To me, I almost have to say all of them.
because I think the only way to make it fair, I don't even know what is fair. I know we can't make everybody happy, but trying to at least, I don't know,
You're trying to
like
fair to have been here the long time and we're promised something,
a certain way, and then it got changed, and then,
and nothing was written down.
It-
I mean, 'cause it
it's
didn't go
hard.
to council, it just, if I remember right, it just went administratively, and nothing was decided with the council.
but no, well, there
No.
was a resolution
No, that
made,
was
so-
that was the vacation thing.
That was okay, vacation.
This one, what happened, we have an original policy, we have a modified policy, and then we have the existing personnel policy, which isn't consistent with the resolution.
And is that policy book, did it go to city council?
But was there any write-ins that affected this policy? I don't think there were.
Oh, okay,
So that's not part of
Okay,
this.
okay.
That was part of the vacation discussion.
okay.
But what I'm saying is if the resolution, if we found minutes that approve the 2017 manual, then I would say that is the manual that we have to start with to start working on. But if the only time it was approved through council was the resolution, then that answers the question on the 960 hours.
if they even played
So
in.
it did that
effect.
2017, 'cause I have it in my notes that it passed in, or it was amended or revised in 2017 and approved in February of the following year, but did we find where it actually did go through city council? Because to me, that's kind of the, what we need to track down.
But I don't think you can take those benefits away from the employees that were told by the administration, meaning the city manager, the mayor, and that they would have their 960 and they could have their vacation time. I mean, not vacation, their sick time.
No, I'm not saying you can take that away, but I'm saying the problem is the discrepancy between who thought that was the case versus who didn't know that was the case, which
Like,
is
how far
really-
back do you go to, like, if we're going to grandfather somebody in, how far back do you go? Is that what you're asking? Or,
Yeah,
or
I think
stating,
that's, I think
or,
that's what we're trying to find is how far back. That's what I heard was 2011, when we had
Yeah.
the
Callie, do you
meeting.
have an opinion? Oh, I thought you were raising your hand. Oh, okay, I thought,
Yeah, whatever that year was, back
Yeah,
in
is your mind
2011.
going like this too, like ours?
we're just,
So 2012 was when that resolution was passed, am I right, Kelly? Okay, so that's my point.
yeah.
That resolution changed the policy. It was clearly the intent. In fact, it references the old original.
Then I would say that we would need to at least start there. If we're wanting to get grandfather in, if you were hired,
Or higher prior to that.
So I think that's a great option. That's a great thing to think about and consider, and probably even maybe the way to go if you want to. I'm wondering, depending on, what if you were to create a third option and most of the employees that would, if you were gonna grandfather, would apply to them, but they actually like the new policy anyways, they'd be like, well, we're good with that new policy as
I mean,
well.
they could pick or choose.
They could opt
They
into
could
the new
pick or
policy.
choose.
make it pop,
Right.
the old
Yeah,
or the
I'd-
new.
Yeah, I'd be good with
That,
that.
I would be,
And if they did that, you just have them sign something that they chose that one,
Yeah,
yes, and
Yeah.
go in their file and,
just to protect both of us.
Well, that's a question I have. It says in the manual that twice, that all employees are required to sign and date a statement acknowledging that they have received a copy of the personnel policy
I read
and
that.
procedures.
I read
Not
that
happen.
yeah, we need to get back to doing that, having it, approving the policy in
So, I
here.
mean, no, it's never been done? What? Well, then, they should,
We would just
Huh?
go back to the signature page of each employee to determine what date they fell
Yeah.
into, is where when they signed.
Sorry. There are speaking into the microphone. There are some times when I've sent out an employee manual and 15 minutes later I get the signed document back. I know they haven't read the entire manual in 15 minutes.
Well, that's not
That's their
not your fault, that is,
It's not.
that is
Yeah.
up to the
But
employee.
that's what that's happened in the past. I know that, and I believe that the employee manual, that people that were hired, like I was hired in 2010, and of course Judy was way before that, but I believe that the one Jet has, I believe it's different than the one I have, that I was given.
But when we change the employee manual, our intent is to change the policy. And that's why we notice all the employees, these are the policies that are changing. If we're going to grandfather something, we need to state it as we adopt a change to a policy.
And not make verbal
Because,
commitments.
because this concept of, no, this is what I agreed to, that's what I get till the day I retired, that's not a thing. We change benefits all the time, we change policies, sometimes we're forced to by the state or by other federal laws or something. We can't just get to this concept of, this is the employee manual that I signed, it's the only thing that applies to me, and I hear that. And I get why from an employee standpoint, you're like, no, that's what I signed up under. That's just not the reality of administration. We have to be able to change things that is gonna affect every employee that's there. And if we choose to grandfather some employees because we need to make a change to something, then we do that when we're changing that policy. Short of that, the new policy applies to everybody.
And is put into the writing that they were grandfathered prior to whatever date.
Because policy changes don't always go bad for the employee. Sometimes they go good for the employee. The one we did last week, we took what was this policy that was half of your vacation payout. Well, if that's the employee manual you signed, then every time anybody comes in, we have to pull up their manual to see how we're going to treat them as an employee. No, we have to have
It has
an
to go both
official
ways.
manual that
No.
we use.
I agree with that.
Well, in open enrollment, everyone has to sign that they came to open enrollment, and so if there are any policy changes, that's when those would be pointed out and initialed, and if they sign the policy, they signed their paperwork for open enrollment, and they refuse to sign something they don't like about policy change, it's just noted and initialed that they refuse to sign. They received a copy.
Will you please come up to the microphone?
We're just not informed of all those changes.
We're gonna get better at that.
Because I was told a lot different than a lot of employees because the previous city manager had something that he would tell me, and it was totally off from everybody else, And then all of a sudden I find out, wow, now it's in this new policy thing that I don't have. So I think we need the communication of, okay, this is what it is, and this, we've changed it now. I think as employers, our employees need that.
That's what we hope to do.
Well, and not to make it even more complicated, but these were administrative changes that I don't even feel like the administrative staff was clear on,
No.
like by evidence of Judy.
Yeah,
So it's like, if the administrative staff isn't clear, how can the employees in the field be clear?
yeah,
And I don't know if that's the way you say it, but you know what I mean. In the departments that aren't part of the administrative staff, that were part of that policy change,
because it was
theoretically.
told one time, oh, you can only have so many comp hours, but it wasn't in the book, it was just told to us. And it was told you could only have so many vacation hours, but it was just told to us, it wasn't in the book. I think eventually it got put in the book, I'm not positive, but, those were just told to us. They were not really a policy, some of them. And some of us had different policies than other. I had a lot of different things told to me that I couldn't do that was different than other employees. So I think we just need a little more communication with anything that gets changed like that. Because that 960 hours, that's been an incentive for all of us to just, okay, I really don't wanna work. I want a mental day. I wanna stay home playing in my garden. No, I gotta save my sick leave. I'm gonna go to work, or things like that. So it was just kind of an incentive that helped us out for some of us being here that long. It's a good incentive, so.
And I think a good policy would be even a statement that said there were no changes from year to year, and they sign that each year, just so it's always, every year, clearly defined, clearly noticed, clearly, recognized with signature.
We promise to do better moving forward. But we're hoping that we can rectify some of these things and clear things up and do better going forward. Yes, it is
It is
a mess. We, yeah.
Well, and Dan, if we do the monetization based on tenure and things like that, can that be in the step and grade and tenure and all the study thing to figure out if we do go the direction of monetizing, if that ends up being the most fair, and then we figure out how to pay that in budgetarily?
You mean we just ask what other cities are doing?
No, I just mean during that same time frame that we're kind of figuring out, 'cause I don't anticipate like this budget time, unless we're just gonna make a decision to have everyone be grandfathered in and then moving forward we're gonna do something different. Is that something you can facilitate between now and the end of this budget period?
Well, that's quick.
'Cause that is really quick.
No.
Okay, no.
We're not anywhere close to a decision that we would then put anything into a budget.
So what would the council's decision be then?
We just need to define this policy, and then if it has budgetary impacts, then we can amend the budget and put it in. That's what I would say. I don't think, do we, is there any, who here is ready to move forward on this tonight?
And that's my other question is, what is our timeline on making a decision on this?
'Cause if we were ready to move forward on it tonight, but I doubt we are, I mean, I'm guessing you're gonna want to think about it, to boil things down, maybe to consider what costs of things would be. There's no way anything we do is gonna get into this year's budget, is what I'm thinking. That's just my...
So there's no motion to be made, this is just a
No, we need to
discussion.
define this policy. We don't have to do it tonight, though. But we do need to define what it is soon. And just for the benefit of our employees, right? So they kinda know what to plan on. A recent retired employee doesn't qualify based on our current, how we're defining this right now, which is not, we don't really know how to define it, but it's just based on an administrative judgment call. The sooner we can define this, the better. But, you know, they were given the option to retire or not based on that and still chose to move forward with retirement. So, you know, we do have, an employee that's scheduled to retire in January who is gonna be really wanting to know what the outcome of this is, right? But the sooner we can get this figured out, the better, because we may have somebody tomorrow decide they wanna retire. We don't know. But I don't know. I mean, we can hash it out and come up with a policy tonight if you want to. Kicking the can down 2 weeks, if we do that, let's at least decide what we wanna try to find out between now and then, or if you just need time to just stew on it. I don't know. I don't know what everybody thinks.
I don't know if I'm gonna put this right. What's the difference with having, like, years of service and benefits to a monetary amount? What are the pros and cons to that, Dan? Is there anything?
The
You know what I'm trying to
con
say?
is that you're definitely now paying it out no matter what, in some form, whatever we decide. The pro to that is that you are basically rewarding people who have saved up. The con, back to Councilman Dean's point, is what if they've been legitimately sick and haven't saved anything up? But if you give them years of service, now you've restored that, you know, if you go one or the other. But I would say you pick one or the other.
Do very many other city governments pay for unused sick leave?
It's a mixed bag.
Is it?
It's kind of like yes and no.
Yep, it's a total mixed bag. Some do, some
don't.
there's as many different versions of policies like that, from nothing to all kinds of different versions of it.
'Cause I know my husband with the city in Las Vegas, he only got like 200, they would pay only up to 200 hours of sick leave to you when you retired. Then you lost everything else.
Yep. I heard that Cedar has a policy that they actually monetize above 5 years, certain amount of years, and pay it out. But they'll let you do that at different times. I don't know. I mean, people have gotten really creative on this. This is not like there's an industry standard. Like vacation, pretty much an industry standard. You get paid out what you have accumulated. That's almost unheard of to be any other version of that. Sick leave is all over the map.
Yeah, like SUU, they don't pay out for your sick leave, they'll pay out your vacation, but don't pay sick leave out.
Well, and I'll tell you where things are. More and more entities led out by the federal government go to a PTO, which is just paid time off.
Right.
They don't give you vacation and sick. They don't accumulate
It's
them
all
separately.
inclusive.
They just say, this is what you get.
Right.
And upon retirement, there's a certain value for that, and it's not the full hour value in most cases, because it's kind of an accumulation of, it's kind of a mash of sick and vacation. And they kind of roll back how much involved they're gonna be in their lives. They just say, you can take paid time off under these scenarios. Whether it's voluntary or involuntary, we just, this is your budget of paid time off you get in a given year. Use it or lose it, or whatever. And so that's where actually most, private sector is going, to a paid time off type scenario. If we ever wanted to go that route, you're gonna have a conversation as fun as this, because you're gonna have to decide how you're gonna convert sick hours into PTO versus vacation hours into PTO.
Let's not do that.
But my whole point of bringing that up is, there is as many different versions of this benefit as you can think of out there.
Well, we don't even have to table anything, really.
I don't think your microphone is
Okay, so
on.
just because I'm
Councilman
like a
Harris.
Sorry.
tie up the loose ends person and
Councilman Harris said we need to table it, is what he said.
fear of not keeping traction on this, though I don't know if any of us can not leave this alone, because we're pretty intensely focused on solving it. But let me just ask this really loaded question. If we honored the resolution, I mean, if someone could get insurance, they could, get it. If they couldn't, they couldn't. I mean, even that documented, went through council, voted unanimously through, all of that, still doesn't track with what some people believed the policy was.
So, and I say this, I hope I don't sound harsh in saying this. If we have a policy, if the policy itself is vague, that's a problem with the policy. But if it was a policy, it was in a public meeting, it was a resolution, and it says what it says, and somebody misunderstood what it meant. I mean, people misunderstand all kinds of things that are in our policy manual right now. If it's very clear, but they have a misunderstanding, that's on them. If the policy itself is vague, that's on us. We need to have a better policy, right? Mm-hmm. So you could have 10 different people who believe different things about our policies. I don't want to have 10 different policies because people believe different things about it. That's why we need to just say, okay, the vague points of 2012, if we want, or 2011, whatever it is, if we want to say that's what it is, let's, one, decide if we're going to grandfather anybody, and two, let's clean up the vagueness that was done in 2012. That's essentially what option one is, right? It's keep the current policy that was created in 2011. Only define what other insurance available means. That's the biggest question of that policy, because it actually defines other insurance, makes it so you don't get this. And if you're going to go that route, then decide whether you're going to do a grandfather from people at that point or back or not. You know what I mean? And
then the revised December 2017, which...
So the problem with that is that it isn't consistent with the 2012, and I think we can probably all agree that our personnel policy manual wasn't updated consistent with that resolution, and it probably should have been. I think most of the people that I have talked to say, I don't think that the city council on purpose meant to go back on that resolution and change it. I think they just readopted the new personnel policy, not realizing that it was inconsistent with the wishes of that 2012 resolution or whatever.
Well, I could see us tonight saying we adopt one, grandfathered people into 2011, and then we can work on clarifying everything. At least we could
do that, yeah.
We could get the employees that were here with with like what Jet says and Judy and that, they're covered, but then we have more time to work on a real policy to see what we wanna do and time to think about it.
Yeah, that could be done tonight, yeah. That's what council wanted to do. I think Sharon was talking about the resolution. The policy that was in the resolution, is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, and grandfather those before,
If you're gonna grandfather them, you gotta grandfather them to a specific thing, and I would say the original policy as it's written.
right.
Not the way it was interpreted by this person versus this person versus this person.
And the only thing I'm saying is that makes clarity to some employees, and then we have time to work on a definite plan.
When I say the original policy in that context is
For the
the
resolution.
one that created this policy in the first place.
2007.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, I'm gonna need somebody to read that to me,
Yeah,
because
me
I
too.
don't know what that
I
policy
think
or that
I have
resolution or.
2007.
That's what I said, we can't do that unless we've seen it.
Right.
Yeah,
Like,
I
I
know
need to be able to look that over
I
and
think that
feel
is
good about
really a valid thing.
So leaning to I'm just, we're table, because we don't even have the information in front of us to be able to have
So if you
a,
wanna go that route, we
knowledgeable
can
discussion.
get that original
I
policy
think
to
that's
you
a good idea,
in
Sharon,
2012 and look at it.
but I wanna be able to see.
No, I think we need to read it and see what it says too,
'Cause if
but
that
I
isn't
think that's where we need to
Because if it's
start.
scrapped
not
and
good,
we
yeah.
go ahead and grandfather people in, then we
We
just.
gotta have a place.
Find out you'd grandfathered them into something you don't agree with.
Right.
Exactly, exactly.
this is another question I don't know the answer to, so I maybe shouldn't ask. Do we have a signed employee manual from every employee?
Maybe.
That's your answer, Kelly, yes or no? You said that we were doing this.
She's thinking.
Oh, you're thinking.
She's,
I can't see you
I
from
can
here.
see the wheels in her brain turning.
Okay, I got you in there.
I have a.
I saw that one.
Because legal, would that be their contract then, if that's the contract they signed?
It's
Or does
not
it,
a,
is
no,
it
that's what I'm
irrelevant
saying, we
because
can't
we've had
go to this
policy
contract.
change?
It's not a contract.
It just acknowledges that you
Received a hand.
That's the last time they saw it, yes, for
Yeah.
sure. That's important. That is important.
It shows
Because
you're notified.
it shows they were notified. That's what yes. But, yes,
Well, and it's an acknowledgement of being notified.
right. Yeah, it proves notification is what it proves.
So how many manuals do we have? What year?
We have, there's only 2 manuals that have any relevance when it comes to
I
policy.
mean, I've looked at
policy
the
manual.
2017.
Right, that is
That's
the
not what we
printed version,
Right.
and then we have the printed version that has been redlined, that has not come back to the council yet.
Okay, but you're talking about a 2007, a 2014?
Okay,
Oh,
so the
right.
reason why I refer to the 2007 is this. If you're gonna say the resolution in 2012 is a date of infamy that everybody prior to that is grandfathered to something and everybody new to that has something else, you have to say what were they grandfathered to? And I'm
I
saying
understand.
they were grandfathered to the original policy, which means you're looking back at the 2007 manual.
Okay, then
Okay.
we
So I
need
would
a
like to see-
2007
I've seen it, somebody
manual.
sent it to me.
I would like to see the 2007 manual.
I don't know if it's the manual or if it's just
Or-
a policy from that manual, but I've seen it, so I'll find it.
I
Okay.
think I have it, because I have the front page off of it that says, so I have revised August 4th, 2006, approved on February 22nd, 2007. And it's a 3-ring binder, so I have the 3-ring binder. This is just the approval date.
Now, I have the resolution that created that policy. It's not the policy manual, it's the resolution that created it. I could put it
So-
up on screen
So
if
the
you'd like to go
resolution
there.
from 17?
This is
or is
from
this-
2002.
Holy moly.
June 1st, 2002 was the resolution that created this policy. It was also the same resolution that created insurance benefits for council and mayor. It was the same resolution.
Okay.
Okay, well, whatever it is, we need it.
He's gonna bring it up right now on our
I'm
screen,
gonna bring it.
apparently.
Can we have it as a hard copy?
I can print it as a hard copy.
Yeah,
All I have is a
don't-
PDF.
I don't, I've gotta have time to look at it, I just.
No, I agree.
Here.
I agree. I'm just saying, let's actually read what it says, just for giggles.
Yeah, let's,
A resolution offering health insurance upon termination from employment to long-term, full-time employees and elected officials. Whoa! I don't know why we lost the thing.
Sonoma.
You're good. Whereas, it has been proposed and considered an offer of health insurance benefit for up to 5 years to long-term, full-time employees. Whereas, Parowan City Council desires to offer health insurance benefits. This is why we love whereases, lawyer guy, because this gives us the intent, right?
Lawyer guy.
I'm listening.
Will you wiggle your thing?
I will wiggle my thing.
Do you like the many names we're calling our attorney?
So respectful to him.
I'm just calling you legal counsel. What do you prefer to be called while we're wiggling our thing over here? He's
I
researching.
wiggled all of the HDMI cables and power cable.
Well, mine keeps going off and on.
Doing a court case,
Oh.
for tomorrow. What is the question?
Look at that.
What do you
Mine's
prefer?
going off and on.
Do you prefer to be addressed as
Oh.
legal counsel, or do you prefer to be addressed as?
You can call me anything you want.
Mr.
Scott. Oh, I am gonna,
Yeah.
tell my wife about that.
Oh, now we got a street.
Sir Scott?
Kelly told me.
Yes. So what's the question?
What's the question, Molly?
Oh, I just asked you what you preferred to be called,
Oh, Scott.
'cause he called you legal guy.
Legal guy. That works too. I like that.
Well,
I've been
It would
called
be
many
the
things.
clerk, the dais.
15 years.
Well,
Terminate employment.
Your Honor, what would you like me to call you?
Legal guy.
Legal guy. Your Excellency.
I mean, this is consistent with the brief legal analysis that I gave you. It would be easier and much preferable if we could paint all of this with a broad brush and say it is X and Y and Z. But unfortunately, because we are playing in the world of hindsight and what they call historical reconstruction, really, of language and policies and things that have taken place, the only way to really do it, and I think I sent it to you, Dan, is you have to go back and find, as you have stated, what was the policy, not hearsay, not he said or she said or I thought or I was told, because that's what, 20 plus years ago, if we go back to 2002. So you have to look to the written word in order to do legal interpretation. So if we're talking about equities for those that were promised a certain policy, procedure, benefit, whatever that may be, you go to 2002, and then if it was changed in 2007, as Dan has said, I'm using that as an example, I don't know if that's when it was, the 2002 to 2007 person, unfortunately, has to now comport with what the new policy is, because you can't, keep going on what was the original policy. And what is unfortunate is if someone didn't know of the changes, or they weren't clear, or they weren't codified in writing or communicated, then they have a valid point to say, I don't see anything in writing for 2007, 12, or 19. As far as I'm concerned, 2002 carries the day. But evidently we have had successive changes in the policy after that. Would that be a fair statement, City Manager Guy?
Yes. My management guy.
Management guy. MG, would that be a fair statement?
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Grandfather somebody, to Scott's point, we gotta figure out what we would grandfather them to, and this
Correct.
was the original thing.
correct.
Yep, this was original. Parowan City Council desires to offer health insurance benefits to full-time qualified employees upon 15 years or more of continuous service with Parowan City when they terminate employment with Parowan City. Whereas, the Parowan City Council also desires to offer health insurance benefits to paid elected officials with 12 consecutive years of employment with Parowan City. And whereas, health insurance benefits offered upon termination shall continue for up to but not exceeding 5 consecutive years from the date of employee's termination from employment or until such time as the terminating employee has insurance benefits available to him or her from subsequent employment, Medicaid, or Medicare. It was in the original policy
So that's weird.
until such time as they have benefits available. That does not mean that it stays there for 5 years partnered with Medicare, and that's what, and now, Jet left, she said that it was always meant to be a secondary. Well, the original policy just says when you have Medicare, it terminates, right? It's over. Whereas, it has been determined that health insurance benefits shall be for the outgoing employee and his or her spouse. In no case shall the outgoing party be allowed to add any immediate family member onto the policy after the date of the termination. Whereas, the terminating employee dying within 5-year period, Parowan City will continue to insure his or her spouse. In no case shall the rights established be assignable to other parties. Whereas, the insurance benefit shall be terminated retroactive to the date the outgoing employee has health insurance benefits available from new employment or is eligible for Medicaid, Medicare. That's kind of a redundancy, but it tells you that that was definitely the intent. Therefore, let it be resolved that by Parowan City that a maximum of 5 years health benefits shall be offered to full-time qualified employees upon 15 years or more continuous service with Parowan City when they terminate employment with Parowan City. This benefit shall also be offered to paid elected officials with 12 consecutive years with Parowan City. Health insurance benefits shall only for the employee and his spouse, his or her spouse. Then it actually has retirement system. Now, this is the language that we actually put in the policy manual. Number 3, retirement system.
And what year was that?
This is 2002.
Okay.
Then it discusses this 960 hours. Except for, is this from the resolution? Sorry, the resolution was, this was the 2011 resolution above that, and the 2002 resolution below that. Except for I don't think this is from that resolution. I think this is copied from the old manual. This is the page that's copied from the old manual. The original resolution that created this policy did not say anything about 960 hours.
Okay.
It's just the manual that then added the 960 hours.
But the original resolution did not say that.
The original resolution didn't say 960 hours. This is from our employee manual that did. And only option C actually refers to this. A, B, and C are talking about other things about retirement. And this is what it said. Parowan City will pay up to 5 years of health insurance for an employee and his or her spouse, provided that said employee has 960 hours of unused sick leave at the time of retirement. This benefit shall also be offered to paid elective officials with 12 consecutive years. The benefit will not apply to former employees or former elected officials that have any other health and coverage, including but not limited to Medicare. So, I think that if we grandfather anybody, you gotta grandfather them to that.
Original.
Resolution, correct?
Yeah.
The other thing is, each of the pages need to have a date on the bottom of them, because they're all mixed. I feel that it's hard to tell, like you're saying, what year was this, the handbook portion that was attached to this, was that a 2002 handbook? Was it
Yeah.
2006? handbook
Yeah,
says
I
it.
don't know
Yeah.
which this comes from, would have to know for sure, but the resolution, that's why we have dates on resolution.
Mhm.
That's why it's part of the resolution.
I agree, we need to put them on the bottom of the page.
So
Mhm.
do you want,
Mayor.
do you want me to send this out,
Yes.
to send out the okay, here's the 2011 resolution, while we're reading them, before we take it and go and ponder. So I keep calling this 2012, let's
But
just strike that forever from the record, it's September 1st, 2011. This is what modified, in fact, it even refers to the original resolution in the thing.
Okay.
So, whereas previous resolution 2261 provided a health insurance benefit of up to 5 years to long-term full-time employees. Whereas Parowan City Council desires to amend resolution, yada yada, offering health insurance benefits to full-time qualified employees upon 15 or more years of continuous service, retires from Parowan City. Whereas Parowan City shall amend its personnel manual to conform to this resolution.
Okay.
So we were going to do that. That's interesting. I never noticed that before when I read through it. I don't think we ever did that, but that answers the question once and for all, that was the intent of this resolution,
Okay.
to amend the manual. Whereas, health insurance benefits offered upon termination shall continue for up to but not exceeding 5 years from the date of the employee's termination from employment or until such time as the terminated employee has insurance benefits available to him or her from subsequent employment, Medicaid, Medicare, or health or other health insurance. That was added.
And what year was
That phrase, this was 2011. That phrase was not in the original resolution. That's one of the major changes of this.
Mhm.
It also doesn't refer to the 960 hours, but the original one didn't either. Just our thing did. Now if you go down and you look at D, which is now C, as a benefit for long-term employees, it's like this is now saying how it's gonna modify the handbook.
This is still in that same
'Cause
resolution?
this is in the language, this is in the same resolution, yes.
Okay.
'Cause it says that we're resolving that we're gonna modify section
That-
Roman numeral something something C, which is this right here. That's what this resolution says we're modifying. As a benefit for long-term Parowan City employees who are retiring after 15 or more years, full-time employment, Parowan City shall pay up to maximum 5 years of health and benefits for all retiring employees who do not have health insurance through subsequent employment, Medicaid, Medicare, or other, this doesn't say Medicare, or other form of health care which would count Medicare. Payments shall commence immediately and may not be deferred. That's a new phrase that is introduced here, but basically it just means you don't get to start the 5-year clock whenever you want.
Right.
This benefit shall not be provided to any employee who is terminated for cause or quits prior to retirement. That's a new concept that this introduces. And health insurance benefits shall be afforded only for the outgoing employee, his or her spouse, until such time as the retiring employee either obtains health insurance or 5 years lapse from date of retirement, whichever occurs first. For purposes of this benefit, a disabled employee who otherwise qualifies for this benefit shall be treated as a retiring employee. In other words, if you're permanently disabled and you cannot go, but you would have qualified, now you're retiring. So this kind of added and tweaked some things. It really made sure to define other available insurance. It adds the concept of that the clock starts the day you retire. A disabled employee is the same as a retiring employee, and what was the other one? Obtains health insurance. Do you realize why that's important, Molly? Because we were wondering whether having health insurance is available. This says obtains health insurance. Yes. The retiring employee.
The retiring.
But it does say, that if you obtain insurance because your spouse's insurance gives you insurance, that's obtaining insurance.
Could have been.
Yeah, we would have liked to have it said a few things. But let's say your spouse has insurance. So this is a concept that, back from my time in the private sector, we insure our employee and half of the employee's kids. Their spouse's insurance can do the difference. That's like this concept in the private sector. I don't know if that ever took off. But it's possible that your spouse works and has insurance for them, but they don't provide coverage for you. And I would say then therefore you get coverage from the city, right? But if you had insurance because your spouse's insurance gives you insurance, then the way this is written, you don't get insurance. And this was 2011 on.
And this doesn't have the 960 hours either, correct?
Mm-mm.
Nope.
No, it does not.
If you come to the mic and the mayor lets you.
Yes, please do.
Halt. No, I'm just kidding.
This was the way it was explained to us, and maybe going forward, we should do this, but our legal counsel at the time explained to us, in our ordinances, if you have a substandard lot and you want to build something, you're grandfathered in. You don't have to worry, Judy, because you go by the 2002.
You were vested.
I was vested. And so maybe on resolutions, it should say, employees hired after this date, or employees hired before this date.
Yes.
Because there's so many people telling me so many, not just me, everyone, different things that now we're all confused. Sorry.
So I'll send you guys both of these,
Okay.
and you recently just received a copy of our recently most printed personnel policy manual.
Modified.
And Callie is working on a Word version of the policy manual with the red lines in it, so you can see the stuff that was redlined in. We have to review that and either adopt the red lines or modify them.
Okay.
You're gonna get that out as well, but
By tomorrow?
by tomorrow at 8 a.m.
I was 100% kidding.
Soon, because we need to get the,
Oh, I was like, I was 100%
Okay.
joking. I had to run it.
Yes.
So I did want to say that in 2022, I think it was 2012, when Shane Scott was the city manager, he had a committee. They went through the policy manual. They did changes. They brought changes to the council in 4 separate meetings. One was so they referred to them in the minutes like section 1, or not section, but revision 1, revision 2. There were 4 of them. My minutes sucked, and I don't have what those revisions are, and I cannot find the packets. I think they're in the basement. So where we don't have, I think that's why I have this copy, is from those changes, but they went to council and they were approved. So
so we have the minutes showing that
they were
this
approved.
packet was approved. We
This
just
was
don't have the
approved, and
detail.
I cannot find them, so I can spend the weekend in the basement if you want me to, and I'll find those. Hopefully. Hopefully they ain't thrown out when we moved. But
Do we believe that the 17 manual includes those changes?
Yes, because it was revised in 2013.
So that's where we believe the current manual that we have that's printed, how we got what we got.
But I would say if we can't find those, that we go with these, because this is what we do have.
Right. Well, we go with the 2017. We need to look at the red line stuff,
But the
and we need to still answer this question.
Yeah, but the 2017 has the 960 hours, and that was not redlined. That was in the manual.
Right. So, and it's possible that they put that back in that
Yeah,
time, is what
yeah.
you're saying.
But I'm saying if we can't find it, we should go with what we have.
Would it be too much for you to ask you to also give us a list of all of the employees and their hire dates?
Yeah, I can do that.
And send that to us too, just so that we know who we're looking at as far as potentially grandfathering in, like how many people is that going to affect, or
So I'm slow.
Whatever.
So was there another change in 2017? Is that what we're saying?
That's what council.
No, we just have a manual
I
from
just-
that date.
Yeah, that's the date, I guess,
Of
that,
this manual that I printed. And then
I don't know why it says 2017.
will print the wrong side because there's still a special name on it.
Okay. All right.
Sorry, she has to talk she has,
Mayor, could you speak into the microphone, or what are you?
Yeah, no, and we're trying to
The
figure
mayor would never normally pound the gavel.
that couldn't be amended or...
I'm gonna pound the gavel on you. You need to speak into the mic, please.
It's just a dated document from when I was first sworn in that has my name on it and dated January 1st of 2022. And at the bottom it says, no employee, officer, agent, or other representative of Parowan City has any authority to enter into any agreement for employment for any specified period of time or make any agreement or representation, verbally or in writing, which alters, amends, or contradicts the provisions of this personnel policy and procedures manual.
And that's what?
So it was on the front of the policy manual because I asked for a copy of it when I was first elected.
well, it also says, Parowan City reserves the right to change any of its policies and or procedures at any time in the future for any reason.
And who is Parowan City?
Right, that's the question, right? How do we change the policy?
Yeah.
This even addresses verbally.
Yeah, it's about the way it is.
So you're saying that somebody shouldn't have changed it, but the council gave the staff the ability to make changes and bring them back to the council?
Right, so I think that's, I mean, as much as anything, it's,
what are you saying?
I'm saying it's a pretty strong statement to say that nothing can be changed, amended, or contradicted to the provisions of
But
the
that's an
policy.
introductory page to our manual.
Right, but I'm also
That's
saying
not
that
code, that's...
regardless of what motion was made and agreed upon at some point, any changes to the policy manual, especially budgetary, should come before city council.
Agreed. We agree that that should happen. Right?
Yes, and no matter how a person was told something different, I mean, because this addresses everything, verbally and writing.
Oh, so you're saying that if somebody told somebody something, that doesn't necessarily hold water?
If they were, I mean, I don't know how you discern that,
No,
what was told.
no, and I think that our honored and esteemed attorney has made that point, that hearsay, or I was told this, or I heard that, or I remember that. Those things are difficult because that's what somebody's planning on, but we have to go by what was written down and do the best we can with it. I as much as you feel bad if somebody understood something, but if they understood it wrong, that's not the city's fault, unless it was literally a change that we made and we didn't notice them. Then it is the city's fault, for sure.
Does anyone have any unanswered questions or things they would like to have researched before we close this meeting?
I think we just need to do a lot of research on our own through this. I mean, to answer here, I don't think we can do that.
So we'll send out the original resolution and then the 2011 resolution, because the reason that those are important is if we decide to grandfather, what are we grandfathering to? You have a copy of the current policy as it is right now, and we are considering either sticking with what was done in 2011, moving forward. We might need to better define it, and we can if we want to. We can change a policy right now. Or do we create an entirely new policy that has monetization and things like that, and we do that for anybody moving forward or anybody from 2011 forward? Those are the things to think about and wrap your mind around. Does that sound like a good?
So from Judy's perspective of if it doesn't specifically say grandfathered in, it's just assumed that it's grandfathered in, just like our ordinances. Is that is that a valid argument on our employee manual? That if it doesn't specify grandfathered in, we would, as a policy, follow it the same way we do in our ordinances?
Yeah, that's a pretty big question. I mean, now we're getting really deep into the lawyer guy, title. Property and sick leave and vacation leave are, under the law, deemed a property right. And property being defined esoterically as, the reasonable expectation of the continuing benefit of a res being Latin for thing. You have the reasonable expectation of the continuing benefit of something. So if Judy had a reasonable expectation when she started, it has to be reasonable, that when she retired, that if she had 960 hours, that she would get 5 years of insurance from Parowan City, period. And if that's what the policy was, and that's her reasonable expectation, but is it reasonable then to continue to expect that if the policy changed in 2012 or 2017? If the new policy was silent on that, then it's a matter of interpretation. But so that's why I think it's important we go through each one, 2002, 2011, 2017, see what the language is, try and infer the intent. It's like trying to be you are the Supreme Court. You're trying, and it's what they do every time they hear a case. You're trying to infer what are the facts, what is fair, and what did the parties reasonably believe at the time these benefits vested, for lack of a better term. And it may be that certain employees are entitled to certain benefits that others that came later aren't. If you started in 2024 and they said, like Cedar City, sick leave is not a benefit. You use it or lose it, and upon termination from employment, that's it. You know, you don't get it. But back in the day, I remember when John Reed Corey retired, he literally had something like 19,800 hours of sick leave, and it almost broke the city because that was the policy. You get paid by the hour for sick leave, and the guy worked there 40 years, and they were like, "You got to be kidding me!" I mean, they wrote out a check in, I don't know what year it was. I'll say 1994 money that was astronomical, but there could be no other interpretation because that's what the policy was, and so that's when they changed it. And then, as Dan said, I would concur, there are as many different, if you go to Southern Utah University's policy, they have a variation of pay in, and you get so much, you know, per year, and it's capped at this, and you can buy back 25% of it and get paid in November for 25% of the sick leave that you accrued, trying to keep equities in place, like we like people to go to work. You know, there's a balance between incentive of people going to work and then on the other end of the spectrum paying them $182,000 when they retire, that the city maybe wasn't expecting, and so that's why, and I know it was a huge task for Dan, and it's probably impossible. If we have, 24 employees or 27 employees?
24 full-time.
24 full-time, and this would get back to if at some point we get into the personnel and policy audit that I don't know that's been done for a while, step and grade and pay, and most cities and towns do it about every 5 to 7 years. I don't know the last time that was done, where you literally take the time to sit down with Callie and say, Callie, when did you start? What did you start at? What are your duties? How long have you been doing them? Were you in Larry's 9-hour planning and zoning commission meeting and thus need hazard pay? and triple time and a half. You know, and then what you would report would be different than me, you know, 'cause I'm not a full-time employee and I'm totally different, or from Judy's jobs, or Addie's. And so then you come up with some fairness, and this is where it also gets tricky. You compare it to cities and towns of similar size, and you can dispel, you know, in a community of this size, it's even more important because you have people on the street going, God, those people at Parowan make more than they make in Chicago. And then you have others say, they haven't got a raise, and you know what I'm saying? And you bring transparency to it, and it's fair. And maybe it's a poor analogy, but I remember, not to tell a me story, but when I had to downsize the National District Attorneys Association because the guy before me went through about $4.5 million and they froze about $50 million in grants, and we had no money coming in. I had about 120 employees, 50 lawyers, 70 staff, so I had to move into a much smaller area, and they're like, we're in cubicles? We have lawyers that don't have their own office? And I'm like, well, I'll be in a cubicle along with you. And somebody tapped my shoulder and said, you need to take a trip out, and I think it was in Maryland, where the Mars Brothers chocolate factory was. And in Mars Brothers, you walked in, and including the Mars Brothers, who were in their late 80s at the time, had a cubicle just like everyone else, and every employee, including them, their salary and benefits were listed on the wall. And I don't know if that was for good morale or not, but it was fair in the sense that everybody knew, you know, what their salary was, what their benefits were, and I think that the employees deserve it, and I think it's dignified, and I think again we're kind of playing catch up, but we can do it, and we'll do it in a professional manner. So I think that's where we're at.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, that, if we don't have any other discussion, I would entertain a motion. Oh, we do have to make a motion?
That's what she was saying, entertain a motion. You were just entertaining a
Entertain a
certain
motion.
motion.
Yeah, so we're entertaining a motion, and you're saying we're going to confirm tabling or whatever it is the council.
Yeah, table it to a specific meeting if you would, especially something like this.
And I wouldn't do next meeting just because we're doing it early, and it's graduation. Like maybe the one after.
And I don't think a week is probably enough time to really look into
Oh, that is just next week. I was thinking 2 weeks away.
Dan, I got a question. Are we gonna look at anything I mean, we know what we're looking at now, but what about some of these other things like 401Ks? Is that part of it?
So, no, the intent of this meeting, we were just gonna do the five-year, and then we made it more broad because we had to answer the other one, so we said employee benefits.
But I'm just saying, some of these other things in that policy, should we look at?
It's up to you. We can talk
I don't
about
mean
employee,
now.
we can talk about employee benefits. That's what we can talk about today, or you can bring up, I mean, we are gonna look at the personnel manual in general, because we need to, at a minimum, address the redlined issues. We need to do that, for sure. But you guys are the governing body that deals with the employee manuals. You can do those whenever you want, if you wanna address a policy.
Well, I just had a question.
No, that's, the intent was, we're gonna bring back the employee manual with the red lines and address that, but this policy for sure needs to be dealt with sooner rather than later. The entire manual and the red line stuff, we for sure need to bring up. It's probably a little lower on the priority list, but needs to be done pretty quick, because there was things that were redlined that you guys haven't seen yet. But there's nothing to stop you from looking at other policies if you want to.
I mean, I feel like once
Well,
we kind of
there's
decide what our base level is, we can break it down from top to bottom and then bring it to council in its entirety. But I feel like need to be done, you know, in subsequent meetings a little bit at a time. But this is just what we need to probably resolve sooner, just because we have people that are trying to make decisions.
So if we're gonna do that, let's definitely keep them as separate items, so that the one doesn't hold the other one up if we get bogged down on something.
Okay.
What about doing a special, like this, another special meeting in 2 weeks? Like the week after council meeting?
What are you looking at?
30th.
That day, we're doing open enrollment at 3:30 to 5. We could do it after that.
What day is that?
Be the 30th?
30th?
I mean, that way we can just work on it before council meeting and all that too, and get, you know.
30th, yeah.
We would have planning and zoning that day.
Well, council meeting's not that night, is it?
Mm-mm.
This'll be one of those 3-week gaps between, so a week from now is council, and then we'll have a 3-week gap to the next council. 'Cause we'll have council on the 23rd, and we won't have it again till the 13th.
All right.
So we could do it on the 30th or the 6th.
How does everybody think on the 30th? At 5? It'd have to be 5, right, Dan?
Yeah.
What about the day before and doing it earlier? Like on the on the 29th?
Yeah.
I'm fine with that too.
And doing
Right
it at
after
3 o'clock.
school?
3 o'clock.
I mean, like 3?
Yeah. 'Cause
Yeah.
I still am at school that week.
I'm fine with that.
Scott, what does that do to you? Works?
I'll be here.
Are you sure? Do you need to check your busy?
Did you call me lawyer guy?
Yeah, lawyer guy, check your schedule.
Be here.
I'm making you a plaque. Just you wait, lawyer guy. I think
Yeah, make a motion.
You can say table to that date for, I mean, however you wanna word it.
I'll make a motion to table this conversation to the date of May 3rd, 29th at 3 p.m.
I'll second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, thank you, good work. So,
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second?
all those in favor?
Aye.
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 Thank you. Thank you for being here.